start. So I'm going to start the recording. So the session is being recorded now, and looks like everybody's hearing me, so we're set to go on that. And that I can get to it. Yeah, there. All right. First thing, I hope y'all had a good holiday weekend, and yesterday was holiday. Assignments that would have normally been due yesterday are due today, which in your class, I believe, is chapters 3 and 4. And I did grade last week in all of my classes but one. I did have all things that were turned in on time graded, except for one assignment in another class. And there was a number of people being late graded, turning in on that one, and that one needed a little more attention. So I'm hoping to get it shortly when I get a chance today. I thought I would actually get it this morning before we even started these sessions today, but I didn't feel fabulous when I woke up, so I waited there a little bit longer this morning and took a little bit slower start. I did work every day this weekend except yesterday. I only worked just over an hour, and that was actually setting up server SA1 in this class. I was writing notes down of what I was doing, and I was just double checking that. So I've got DC1 and SA1 set up for this class on my machine at home now. And I'm going to start working through the assignments now as best I can. My schedule is full, so trying to squeeze things in. So that was because I did spend a good bit of time Saturday on DC1. As y'all, having already installed DC1, know that one takes a good while to do. And may fixed a few typos in the directions I have out there on both of them also. So if you go back to install those again, you may want to pull down a new directions on it. I didn't make there weren't any substantial changes, but as I was going through, because I actually followed my directions to install the two machines, and I'll still do the same thing for the other machines. And so I caught several times that there was a typo that I had there where I left out a word, or there was on one of the set of directions, there were actually some spelling errors at the bottom of it, so I corrected those while I was at it. I thought I had all of those corrected when I posted them out there, but obviously hadn't, and I think that was partly an issue of in one of them I had posted out there, and somewhere the last part of it disappeared, and I could not find a complete copy of it back then, and I had to go back through and do those last steps again. And I probably forgot to spell check after I finished doing that. Is probably what I did. Because it does take a while to do those up, and then the other part is once I get through doing them, I have to go through and put alt tags on all of the images so they're ADA compliant, because they have to be ADA compliant before I post them out there in Blackboard. Although I have posted a few things real quickly in Blackboard that hadn't been fully checked on that I was trying to get that done too, but where it was needed right off, and we did that real quickly, but as quickly as I could, I went back and did that. PowerPoints has been an issue of getting those posted in your classes, but I think in your class all the PowerPoints are out there at this point. So I think I have put them all out there in your class for the whole semester, because I think the only thing I've got to still do in your class actually is weekly. I got to make sure I've got a discussion that I want to have out there, which obviously those of you listening in on this don't have to do the discussions. And then the test, I know I don't have them fully out there yet at this point, but y'all can't see them anyway, so that doesn't make any big difference to you. Yeah, the PowerPoints are all there. So I went through and got that all done, and those are fully there in your class. My Cisco class, not, and that's partly because Cengage had theirs better, but they still had some things not ADA compliant on them, so there was a few things I had to fix. But the Cisco class, they claim their stuff just like Cengage claims their stuff is fully ADA compliant. It's not, because they are missing a lot of alt tags and a lot of other stuff, and I'm having to fix all. And I know the PowerPoints are helpful to some students to study by, because I've gotten that feedback from students along the way a number of times, that some of them like using the PowerPoints as they're studying, to have the PowerPoint up and be able to see what's the big points in each of the areas they're reading, to pay attention on. So that's why I'm trying to get those out there too. So in chapter 2 in your book, when you did the server Hyper-V, which their directions was not really clear to me. I didn't catch fully what was going on there. I thought you were setting up server Hyper-V in the chapter where you were supposed to already have server Hyper-V set up, and then they wanted you to create those other 2 machines in server Hyper-V. First thing is, they've got you doing it using Hyper-V, but that's finding a copy of Hyper-V and stuff to get it to work and stuff that I've not had. It's supposed to be sitting there at Azure Tools, Dev Tools for teaching. There is the server version of it, which I think is what we really do need, but I haven't had a chance to pull down and try it and everything. VirtualBox is the one I know best, and that's what I've given you directions in. VMware, I've used some too, and I know it's some also, so I know it works also. So I've encouraged y'all to use VirtualBox for your virtual machines in here. It also seems to be, VirtualBox seems to be a less resource one on it. Advantage of VMware is that VMware is the one that a lot of places are using out there as far as businesses for doing their virtualization. But it is more resource heavy on it, and so I really haven't done a lot with it, but I have done some with it, and it'll work. And you'll see there's sometimes some little notes that I've got out there on VMware telling you how to do something if you were in that. Hyper-V I have not used, and it is Microsoft's product. I used their previous products because that was actually what we used heavily, and then when they dropped them and they went to Hyper-V, and from everything I'm seen, says it's not as friendly, etc. on it. So chapter 2, you could do it in VirtualBox. Just realize as you're doing the directions that when it tells you to do something in Hyper-V, you got to do it in VirtualBox, and it's going to be a little different. However, the things they're having you do, you've already done setting up your other machines, so you should be able to do that, like going out and making another disk drive in the machine. You did that in several of your machines where in my directions I showed you how to do that, to create additional machines, particularly in DC1, if I remember right. I went back and had you do them afterwards separately. But in any event, that's there. So my suggestion on it would be, which I've got out there in the notes at this point, about do those machines in VirtualBox, not in Hyper-V. Second thing is, on some of your machines, doing virtual machines inside virtual machines. On some machines that does not work, although it pretty well does nowadays. But the second thing is, if you've got, I believe it's the Intel processor, it gets more complicated to turning on the ability to do virtual machines inside virtual machines. I think the AMD one is just does it more automatically for you, but if you've got Intel processor, it's a different matter. And they don't need to actually be embedded inside of server Hyper-V. So you could have created those two machines standalone. If you haven't gotten those straight, you can still do that. However, if you haven't done that chapter, there is the late penalty on it now. I didn't get a lot of questions from students on it, so when I don't get questions from students, my assumption is things are working. I had a couple of students that did write me with lots of questions, but I had a number of other students that didn't ask any questions on stuff. So I'm assuming things are working for them. And then a couple of students that apparently have not started doing the work yet, which I'm not sure about that one. We are 25% the way through summer semester at this point, because that was the end of week 2, and there's only 8 weeks. So, and that server Hyper-V machine, you do need that one in chapter 4 for activity 5, if I'm remembering correctly. The rest of the, and then when we get to chapter 6 and 7, I believe it's 6 and 7, maybe, I think it is 6 and 7. Let me flip back over here for a second, just to remind myself what I'm saying right here, because I'm going off the top of my head and I just came in this morning. So hold on one moment. Yeah, 6 and 7, you're probably not going to have assignments on it, but 6 and 7 are not assigned. 6 is not assigned until next week, and then 7 and 8 are the following week, because you've only got chapter 5 this week. So I'm still working with chapter 6 on setting stuff up on it, because it's actually back to wanting to do stuff with Hyper-V inside a machine. So we're playing with that one. So Jesse, are you having a problem with Hyper-V or with server Hyper-V?
Server Hyper-V. The server Hyper-V.
Mm-hmm.
I've set it up, but I can't get it. The IP address I can't set up on it. It's got a, okay, what is it? A 192.168.0.1/24
Mm-hmm.
on it. And how do you? That's in the Ethernet, right?
That probably is your Ethernet port, because you're going to set the addressing up just like you did on the other machines.
Yeah.
To network connections.
Mm-hmm.
And choose. And on that one, I think you've only got one network connection. Let me look and see. Yeah, because you've only got one network connection in there, so that one's just that Ethernet.
Well, when you put the IP address on it, the 1/24, it won't get that character, won't it?
Okay, you're not going to type it in as 1/24.
Okay.
Because the /24 is giving you the subnet mask.
Okay.
And that's in shorthand form. And when you put the subnet mask in Windows, you have to use long form, which is the same as was on those others that they were all /24 also. The /24 says that you've got 24 binary ones followed by, and the whole subnet mask is 32 bits long.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So
zeros. So you're going to put it as 255, 255, 255.0, assuming I just said three 255s.
yeah,
Okay.
okay,
Now on, I think server 2019 actually will let you use shorthand on it, but can't say absolutely on that one. But it seems like something I'd looked at on server 2019, it will let you do shorthand or longhand on it. But the /24 is just telling you what the subnet mask is, and the so that's just telling you that in that case it is 255.255.255.0.
okay,
But that number there in the slash is actually telling you how many bits are turned on
okay. That's
in the
what.
subnet mask. Okay, does that make
So the
sense?
same, so the same setup applies to the ones you gave us directions like DC1 and SA1.
They're essentially the same.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to change some specific little settings on them. That that the address will change. Although in this case, the server Hyper-V is actually using the same address as DC1 used. But remember, those are on two different networks. You're not going to be running server Hyper-V at the same time you're running server DC1. Okay, so
Correct.
they're totally different. So that's why it can be the same address, because it's not on that same network with it. Actually, if you look at the directions, the configuration sheet that I gave you, the page from the book, or look in the book at the page where it tells you the configurations, that it tells you could use .5 instead of .1.
Okay.
If we were going to be running DC1 at the same time as you ran Hyper-V, but my suggestion to you is don't do that. You can do the 0.5. I have no problem with that. Don't run server Hyper-V at the same time you're running DC1. Only have the machines running, virtual machines running that you actually need, and shut them down when you're not using them. Don't put them to sleep. Shut them down. And that way they're not, because if you put them to sleep, it's just like if you put your computer to sleep. It's still using resources during that, because you didn't actually turn it off. And so there's resources still being used. Now, the advantage of putting machines to sleep is that you've put them to where they're not using as much resources and that they immediately come back up. However, in today's age, as you're moving to new machines now, that's less of a consideration, although I've not read this anywhere, but this is my experience on it. That would be less of a consideration now because of how quick machines start up. Because if you're using an SSD drive, putting to sleep is not that as important of an item on it, because it can retrieve all the information and come up much quicker on it. And your memory's also gotten faster too. So whereas when before you had the slowdown of trying to get it off of those 7,200 RPM or 10,000 RPM hard drives, and that took some time, and so it took a while to bring them back up. So people did put them to sleep, but I've never been one, of all the years we can put machines to sleep, I've never been one to put machines to sleep anyway. I'll always power them off.
Yes, that's what I do. I rather power them off.
So, and particularly with these virtual machines, and I know some people love putting machines to sleep. And actually I do. My laptop does end up in a sleep state, but I don't go to a sleep state on it. It just puts itself automatically there. Because when I'm travel, because I actually normally am going to South Georgia on the weekends. So when I go to take the unplug the laptop and to put it in the car and take it with me. I don't turn it off or anything. I just close it up and take it with me and then open up when I get there. A lot of times it has gone ahead and gone into a fully sleep state or whatever on it, but I didn't go to putting it to sleep, and so it comes right back up. And my reasoning on that one is, which is another reason for going to putting machines to sleep, is that it actually then stays in the same state for when I get there and I start up, or I'm going to be traveling in a couple of weeks, and that as I get to motels each night and go to work, that everything that I had running before, basically everything that I had running before will still be running for me out there, and that I don't have to go through and try to reopen different things. Now, Adobe Photoshop does not. It usually shuts itself down in that process. But like Chrome continues to sit there with all the tabs. So I usually have on my home machine, about 8 or 9 tabs running out there. Even on my machine here in the office, and I just started Chrome up this morning. Right at the moment, I've actually got 3 tabs running on it.
Can I ask you a couple of questions on that server Hyper-V? Okay, we got server Hyper-V we create, and then we got the other 2 machines, which
we got server VM1 and server VM2, which they actually take you through in the chapter of setting those up.
Yeah.
Which to me, and the next time I teach this again, I'll probably do the same thing I used to do with the old version of the books for 2012, because they were written similar to this, that in the future I'll probably have students do chapter 2 before they do chapter 1.
That'll be real helpful.
I didn't catch that Tom Cho had done the same thing on it because I was in a hurry at the point when I was having set this class up for the summer. And I didn't notice that. I thought with this being the installation book, my assumption was chapter 1 went through and showed you how to install, but I gave you install directions anyway. And I would have anyway, either way. But it would be better, in my opinion, to go through 2 and then go through chapter 1. His assumption has gone from, on writing this book, that is being done in a classroom, and that server is already set up on at least 1 machine in there, and so the students can go in, look around that server, and then he has them go through to do the installation. And in the old book, he actually led you through like server DC, what's the server DC one, the domain controller. He went through and showed how to install that one plus the server core one, or in server 2016 words, the desktop experience versus non-desktop experience. And I don't like that one on Microsoft either, that they should have, where you've got the 2 different versions sitting out there of server core and the GUI. They should have the server core one labeled as server core, not just as server 2016. And the other
that threw me off on the beginning,
because it sounds like the first one that doesn't have any words beside it would be the more complete one, when actually it's desktop experience has got the GUI in it. And that's why I specifically told y'all in the directions what to do on that. But y'all need to know how to use server core too, which is why you've got that last machine.
DM2?
DM2, I believe it is using, because DM2 uses server core, because you need to know how to use server core and you need to know how to use the GUI. Okay.
So my question is, we're going to have to do I haven't completed I'm going to have to redo. Well, I got a little more promise to do in my server Hyper-V, but it looks like I'm going to have to do a standalone on the other 2 machines on my virtual box, because I don't got
that's my suggestion to you, is for server VM1 and server VM2, make those standalone machines. There's no reason for them to be embedded machines, other than learning how to make an embedded machine.
Okay.
And that's got complications to it. But the only thing involved in embedded machines, where you're making them in Hyper-V, is Hyper-V does come installed in Server 2016, so you can create those ones. But the problem is the processors on a lot of the machines are not set up to allow doing embedded machines without making a change on it. The Intel processors I know are still that way, and there's commands you have to run. And I think it's the Intel, and then the AMD. I'm thinking I may have those two backwards. Okay, y'all got to bear with me on that one. Okay, but it's one or the other. That you have to go in and you have to put a command in to allow doing embedded virtual machines. Now you go back a couple of versions of the different virtual machines out there, and the you couldn't very well do it unless you were running type 1 hypervisor machines, which is where you've got virtual machines running on bare metal, not on top of an operating system. Y'all are running type 2 hypervisor, and do be aware of those two out there. That there's type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. Because if you take a certification exam of Network Plus or Server Plus and some others, I know Palo Alto's exam had it too, that those exams very well, CYSA Plus also had it on it, that those exams very well could have questions for you on. They had questions on there for me that about the difference between type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. So definitely be aware of what the difference of those two type hypervisors are. Now, y'all are doing type 2 in here, but the other part to be aware of is as far as when you're operating them, it's going to be same for you, whether you're type 1 or type 2. The question is there an operating system running underneath them or not? And when you go into a data center that is running virtual servers, which most of your servers today are virtual servers, and most of those cases they're actually running them on type 1, that they've put VMware or Hyper-V on right there on the bare box on it, and then they've got the virtual machines running on there. Now, obviously uses less resources running a virtual machine on the bare metal versus running it on top of another operating system, because now they're accessing directly to the stuff on the machine, not going through the other machine to access to it. But as far as the operations, it's the same for you. So you're learning in the process here how to do your your virtual machines.
So let me ask you a question on the server Hyper-V. When we're doing when you're setting up the private network for it, that it says to do it, server Hyper-V, because we got server Hyper-V, then we got the VM, the other two machines, right? So it's 3 machines altogether. What we're doing, right?
And
or is Hyper-V another one?
Actually, on those, so you got 3 different machines there, but as far as them networked, you're really not dealing with those networked, I don't think, in terms of it. But
because they tell you to set up a private network for it, for the VM1, VM2, I think.
And okay, connected to private net. Okay, don't worry about that on there where it says about connected to private net. I didn't notice those comments to there because we actually haven't set up a separate.
Yeah, well, that's I was at a loss for that.
Virtual switch that we're not dealing with that. There's a virtual switch automatically out there that you're working.
Okay. That's, and one more question is
where I know you can do, and I think you can, and VirtualBox also, that you can create a virtual switch if you want it out there. I know you can in VMware, but that gets more complicated, and that's not anything we're really needing in here.
Good, 'cause
I'm sure in Hyper-V you could also, but we're not needing that for what you're doing in any of these 3 server classes that you'll take from me.
all right.
It's just like where they've had you connecting, telling you to put the default gateway to 250. There's not a machine out there with 250 on it, because that would actually be the virtual switch.
Okay. Yeah, because I haven't had no actual training on that yet. That's what I was a little bit confused. And the other question I got is it says enable dynamically. So that means it's gonna be a fixed size, right?
What's enabled dynamically?
The storage on it, the disk.
Okay, no. If it's dynamic, it's not fixed, and that's what you. Let's see. Dynamic memory disabled for the memory, and that you don't need to worry about either. You're just going to set the memory on that. I don't see where you're seeing on the disk, but set the disk to dynamic like I had you set them at anyway.
Okay.
Because actually you've got the full size of the disk available, but it's not using it out there on your machine. It's not taking all that space until it actually needs that space.
So what I'm going to do is just follow the directions that you showed me.
You can pretty well just go along using my directions for SA1.
Yeah.
Because you're not connecting to a domain, so you don't need to stuff that's on those other machines, and you're not using server core, so DM2 won't work. But
because I was trying to follow specifically the directions on that, and that's why I wasn't able. I mean, I built the machine, but it wasn't working properly. But I got you now. I should be able to have it no problem.
Using SA1 directions, but substituting changes that it says down there on it. So, and like where it says to have the Hyper-V role installed, ignore that line because we're not using Hyper-V.
Okay.
But
and so we just get DM1 and DM2.
But like memory, they actually say on VM1 and VM2 setting the memory to 1 GB. If you do that, that will reduce the amount of memory. That also gives you an indication right there that where it normally takes 4 gig, I think is what it defaults to, 2 or 4. I think it's 2 gig. It actually defaults to 2 gig, if I believe, remember right. And that's what you can leave for Hyper-V also. Because you can go back and expand the amount of memory on the virtual machines also if you did need more later. And I know somebody needed the other. So yes, Ashwin, I see your note right there too. And before I go any further, let me real quick, because y'all heard my phone beep there and beeped again, just in case the extended warranty people decide to call me at this point. We won't have the phone ringing in the midst of everything. So the 2 virtual machines that just create them in VirtualBox as standalone machines. Don't try creating them inside server Hyper-V. Did I answer the question clearly to you or not, Ashlyn? But just do them as standalone machines, just like you did all the other machines. Okay. So that's the big ones on that. And then do make sure that you are doing the screen prints. Also make sure you do go back and read notes on the grade after I've graded items. If you get less than 100 on an assignment, I will always have notes on it. Okay. If you get a 0 on it, more than likely, if you got a 0 on it, it's got notes on there that tells you got things you got to fix for me. Now, there was just something way off, or particularly on early assignments, the chapter 1, chapter 2 assignments. If y'all didn't do the screen prints correctly, that or label them or whatever, that for that first week, that I will return those and tell you, you got to label these for me and resubmit them, and then I'll regrade them and you'll get the correct grade for it. If you do have something that gets graded a couple of times, it is the highest grade that counts, and that's what goes in the grade book. But definitely do look back and see if there's notes. But also on 100s, sometimes I have notes on there also. I don't want to answer this one. I guess I'll just let it ring. So y'all ignore that ringing in the background. I'll call her back after we finish this. Because it was Assistant Dean, but with whatever she was calling on, I know can wait a few minutes. Although I've got another session at 11 o'clock. So do read my notes also, because even if you got 100 on the assignment, I may have some notes on there also for you about that. I'll let something that there might have been something that I went, you need to do this differently than what you're doing on how you're doing on it. Or that I made some notes about maybe you asked some questions in there, although that's really not where you need to be asking questions, that I'll answer them. That I've included some additional, sometimes we'll include some additional information for you on an assignment with 100 on it. Does everybody follow on that? About if it's less than 100, definitely go back and see why you got less than 100. Because if you get less than 100, I will give you an explanation there why you got less than 100. I don't just put a score on there and no explanation to it. That always irritated me in college, to get a paper back that just had a number that was, I wrote a paper in graduate school, I remember, and I got it back and it had 96 on it. And that was the only thing written on that entire paper. I have no idea in the world why I got a 96 on that paper, why it wasn't 100. It didn't make any difference anyway, because I still got an A out of the class, but it would have been nice to have known what was it I did that he didn't like on it, to be able to do better on any other things I do in the future. But so I always put notes on assignments when they're less than 100. If they are 100, they may have notes on them also. Okay. On it. Okay.
So let me ask you a question on the assignments when you if they ain't got nothing to put on the post on there, so we just put done, or what did you want us to put on there?
Okay, if an activity, and I think all of y'all's stuff on your activities in this course, everything has got, you're doing something on the computer on every one of them. So you should be doing a screen print of something in each activity, but you only have to do one screen print per activity. So like 1-1, do a screen print. So on the first activity in the chapter, in each of the chapters all the way through the book, except for I think chapter 1, but I think even chapter 1 may have. But the rest of the book I know for sure. The first activity is where they have you running the snapshot. I think I have listed it. I'm trying to list it on everything as a requirement to do. But if you don't do a snapshot on that one, I'm not going to penalize you on that one. But if you don't do a screen print on that one, because all you're doing is running the snapshot. And y'all do need to run the snapshot on each chapter, because that's going to set all of your settings back to like they were originally. Okay, so you got to run a snapshot on each machine. to restore it back to the way it was. So they're not building using things from chapter to chapter as they go through these books. In the previous versions of these books, you actually stuff built all the way through the book, and you'd use something that you had done in chapter, when you were in chapter 3, it would require things to have been done in chapter 2 to be able to do the stuff in chapter 3. In this book, it's having you, in this series of books, it's having you set the machines back to the original settings as you do each chapter, which is what occurs in activity 1 in each chapter. So that one's just running the snapshots on all of the machines that you're going to use in that chapter. Okay. Go ahead and do a screen print would be the easiest thing to do to make sure you got all your screen prints there. But if you don't have a screen print for activity 1 in a chapter, I'm not going to dock off on that one because you really weren't doing anything on that. But you do need to do it. Does that answer on that, Ashlyn? And the rest of y'all, is that clear about that? But I think this book, I think every activity, you've got stuff to be doing on the computer, so you should have a screen print for me. You also have questions on some of the activities, and you need to be giving me the answers to those questions there in that same Word document right there along with the screen print. Okay? Now, when y'all take 2413, if you take 2413, that book actually starts in the first chapter. The first 5 or 6 activities in the first chapter, there's nothing done on the computer. It's all paperwork. So in that case, they don't do a screen print for me. They just answer all the questions. But in this one, I think all the way through this book, you're going to have something to do in every activity on the computer. But if by chance we do hit something that doesn't have something to do on the computer, then answer any questions on it. If there were no questions to answer and there was nothing to do on the computer, which I have seen in some other books, which is why I've worded it the way I've worded it on some things, then you need to tell me that you did it, which is back to what Jesse or what somebody was asking me a little while ago.
Yeah, Jesse.
So if it does have absolutely nothing done on the computer in the activity and nothing for you to answer, yes, put done. But I don't think y'all are going to have any activities that have that occur on. If you do anything on the computer in the activity, do a screen print. It's your choice what you do a screen print of. But do a full screen print. Show me the whole screen that you're seeing, which may not be the whole screen because this is Windows, so part of it may off the screen. But show me the whole thing you're seeing, including the Windows taskbar with the date. Okay, so the date's got to be showing down there. Now I'll go ahead and just tell you straight out forward. That is a method for me to make sure you're not cheating. Okay, that you didn't go out and just find these screen prints somewhere on the internet.
Whoop, you froze on me.
Which was obvious they didn't do them. All right. Any questions? As we have gone through. So this week you are on chapter 5. And that's just going further into the storage solutions that you started on in chapter 4. So that's just learning more on the storage solutions out there and how you can work together, work the different virtual disk and the hard disk all together. Remember, with Server 2016 and Server 2019 takes us even further, okay, is that it has become more cloud oriented. So you're definitely going to see there in chapter 5 some more of where you're doing a cloud orientation of your storage. Okay, so that set up your own cloud in your organization where you've got the several hard disks put together, and that you've got people doing back to there, and that you're running a cloud also, but it's a private cloud because it's just for within your organization. So they're going to show you in terms of that, and with working with these as virtual machines is really a good idea on this whole part, okay, of all of these machines, of the way you're learning on it instead of them being physical machines. Because even if we were teaching this class in the classroom, I'd still be having you work with virtual machines on it. You'd have virtual machines in the classroom, or probably, which is the way I used to teach it. But probably today, I would be strongly encouraging you to bring your laptop to class with you and set up on your laptop so that you could take stuff home with you and work on it from home. And that's a limitation with an in-class teaching of these now, is what can you do there versus making it available outside. And some schools are using AWS or something. Would cost the school somewhere in terms of $75,000 to $100,000. You're going to be looking at storage pools and additional things that you can do with storage in Chapter 5. It is highly useful information on what you're doing in there. Learning how to do this stuff in PowerShell is especially useful to you. And after you've done all of this stuff doing with PowerShell, if you're going out and looking for a job in terms of using the server or working with server and stuff, I would definitely tell, and maybe add it on my resume or put it in the cover letter, that you have learned how to do some command work with PowerShell. That is a skill that is in demand out there also, of working with PowerShell. However, I'll also tell you this. Basically, what you're doing in PowerShell is the same type of things that you did at command prompt before that. And if you go back far enough, it's what was done in DOS, although a lot more powerful now than what it was back then. So these commands for me are distinctly have much more relevance to me, where I recognize on them. It's just I learned to do them at a DOS prompt originally, and then I learned how to do them at the command prompt from within Windows, whether it was from command prompt in the GUI or whether it was the command prompt at Server Core, and then now doing essentially the same commands, although you've got more powerful commands available to you to do with it at PowerShell. Although y'all have noticed, you also do have some things you can't do in PowerShell, but you need a command to do it, because if you do these things using the commands, you got a lot more power available to you than when you do them in the GUI. The GUI is a whole lot friendlier, but it doesn't require you to know as much and doesn't give you as much power as being able to, as when you do things at the command prompt. And when I'm using command prompt, that's command prompt in the broad sense of including PowerShell, command prompt, all in that whole picture. All right, any other questions for me? Because we have run 50 minutes already. Actually, we've run a little more than 50 minutes, because I actually started talking to y'all right before 10 o'clock.
Yeah, well, your video done went off on me.
I wasn't sure if that was mine or not. It said that there was connection on it, and I see the video is off on there. That it said that the connection was not real good, and
There you are.
So I just now noticed the camera was turned off down there. I saw the little message pop up there, and I wasn't sure if it was me or not.
Well, this was a very helpful session. I know that. I needed really clarify a lot of that on that server Hyper-V
and
specs.
then so, and the school connection is not always the best on doing videos and stuff across, all that's where I'm doing it from. Although, like when I go to upload this recording, I won't do that from here, although my work time at school is the only one that counts now, because they don't have us being able to telework starting this summer. But it's my connection at home, and the distance education coordinator, she tells me the same thing, is for me to go home and download the video and then upload it to YouTube, because our connections are much more sound and better quality from home than here at the college. So that's what, so like tonight, hopefully I can upload these videos, because with your comment on this being so helpful, Ashlyn's comments through here too, I assume Matt has been in here the whole time, because I haven't heard much from him. But that hopefully we've got his information. That this would probably be helpful to your other classmates too. So I will try definitely to get this one uploaded tonight. So, because there are some other students that do watch the recordings. I also do know some of y'all may watch the recording besides watching the live session, because I remember when I first started putting recordings out there that I had students, and they were actually of live lectures, and I had students in the class tell me that was really helpful to them when they were studying later in the week, that they go, I wished I could remember what Dr. Watts said about such and such. And that may well be your case for today's. And that then they could go back and listen and hear exactly what I said about whatever it was. Where the students that that were in the online session that I was putting it out there for, I didn't get as much feedback from them on recordings out there for them as I did, surprisingly, from the ones that had heard me live. And I just casually off the hand stuck the recording out there in the live class, because without thinking about that it could really be used. But the only thing I had to do, extra work for me to stick it in there, was just stick a link in the class for it, because I'd already downloaded and uploaded it. They are uploaded to YouTube intentionally for ADA purposes, just like I was talking about at the beginning of the class on PowerPoints, etc. When you put stuff on YouTube, it automatically nowadays closed captions all their recordings. So that's the reason I put them out there to YouTube. Collaborate does not close caption the sessions or the recordings, which makes them actually not ADA compliant. But YouTube does when I upload them to there. And so that's why I upload them to YouTube, and then I put the link back in there in the course, because then they're closed caption. So if we have any students that are hard of hearing, that they can read the closed captioning on it. And actually, YouTube's closed captioning is very good. Now, there are some other closed captioning softwares that I have tried to use in the past and tried them recently. It does horrible. I went to read what one of them said I had said in a lecture one day, and y'all would have been filing complaints after 5 minutes with the president if I'd actually been saying things with that it said I was saying, because I would have had a sailor blushing about the language I was using that it came up with. Facebook seems to do a pretty good job also, but they're inconsistent on when they close caption automatically, because I put church service on it on Sunday morning, and they have started closed captioning the church service, and seems pretty good on what the closed captioning is that it generates. But they don't always do it. That's the odd part. Some Sunday mornings they're closed captioning, some Sunday mornings they don't, some Sunday mornings they do part of the time and not part of the time in the service. So they're still apparently going through the learning curve on it, but I haven't seen them advertise about they do that anyway, but it just started happening, and we're using free service with them at my church. So but that's real nice on them doing it. I've actually gotten comments from several people at the church that watch the Facebook version of it, where we stream across Facebook, and about how nice the closed captioning is and how helpful that is to them. And that's when I found out it was closed captioning. I went, whoops, didn't even know it was closed captioning. I went back in and looked, and I went, okay. So that's it for today. Let me let you go because I do have to get to the next class in 5 minutes, and I'm going to call back the assistant dean real quick right here. And so y'all have a good week. I will see you next Monday. So we'll be back on normal routine next week. So chapter 5 will be due on Monday, not Tuesday next week. The delay this week was purely for this week for the holiday yesterday. You will have that again work to your advantage the 4th of July, because 4th of July actually falls on Sunday, holidays Monday. And so that week that you'll have till Tuesday also to turn in assignments. Okay? And I will talk to y'all later. Have a good week.
Okay.
And I'm stopping the recording.